What you in for? Manus was horrified by the Crumlin Road prison. The thick stone walls, with all the ugly hatred that had been instilled in them over the years, freaked him. He didn't find the strip and internal search too bad, but then he was well used to them. The prison guards got quite upset though when he said he didn't believe in religion. We don't give a shit for your beliefs. Are you a Tig or a prod? I'm neither. What school did you go to? St. Augustine's in Orangefield. Manus had answered truthfully and totally baffled him. He was led into D wing. Even the electric light shone grey. A cell door was opened and he, zombified, walked in. The door was slammed shut and he stood in his cell. It stank of piss. Concrete that had been darkened by years and horror. Steel door, small barred glassless window, bed, table. He stood on the table to look out. His view was an oil tank, oil and tar stained concrete, and barbed wire, lots of barbed wire. It was late November, dark and rainy. His cell door opened. A uniform stood in the doorway. The hard black plastic peak of the cap was pulled down to the bridge of the nose so that its eyes were visible only as small slits at either side of the peak. You're the one trying to top yourself in Tennant Street. The officer came from Scotland. And Manus had difficulty deciphering his accent at first. Try anything like that in here and I'll castrate you. Manus stared vacantly as the door was slammed shut again. His earlier beating in the police barracks had included a policeman, twisting his testicles as he called Manus a sick, junky bastard. This was the 1970s in the wealthy, civilised West. They couldn't really get away with things like actual castration anymore, or could they? Manus lay down on a grey blanket and fell into a grey dream. When next the door opened, Manus rose, still unsteady on his feet after his ordeals and the capsules he had received. So he was a bit slow in making it over to the door. It was slammed in his face as he reached it. He wondered how he was to go about doing things right. He went back to sleep. There wasn't much difference, but he figured it was evening the next time the door opened. An inmate stood in the doorway with a tea urn and egg sandwiches. Turned towards Manus, the inmate silently expressed what he thought of the warden who had turned his back on them to yell at someone across the corridor. Manus drank his tea and ate his sandwich and went back to sleep. Manus was ecstatic when at the end of the third day he was let out for exercise. Grinning like a lunatic, he shuffled down the corridor. They had taken the laces out of his shoes in the cells in Town Hall Street, in case he would hang himself with them. In the police barracks, they had wanted him to sign guilty to a chemist he had robbed, but since they didn't have any evidence, Manus wouldn't sign. Mostly they would punch him in the lower stomach. He would slide down the wall. They would pull him up by the hair, palm him hard in the face, and punch him again in the stomach. Manus would slide down the wall. He enjoyed an amazing clarity throughout his beating. The men were police officers. They probably had wives and kids and puppy dogs. They lived in an extremely violent city and dealt daily with people who would joyously kill them. Manus, as a petty criminal, was a light relief for them. They had all had a drink, and he was like a mild workout on a Thursday evening. This is not your poofy drug squad you're dealing with now, one of them had said to him. They were CID, real men. Manus lost track, but the beating seemed to go on for some time. It wasn't even a cell, but a very small room, more like a large storage cupboard. It had no window to the outside wall, but There was only a light partitioned wall between it and another room, and there was a series of windows at the top of the partitioned wall. Manus could hear people typing in the other room. So it's to be supposed that whoever was doing the typing could hear Manus being beaten. In fact, at one point in the meeting, Manus had been lying on the floor and looked up to see a uniformed policewoman in the doorway. "That's not the way," he heard her say before the door was closed. Eventually, Manus had said he would sign anything if they would just give him a cigarette and a time and space to smoke it on his own. They lit a cigarette for him before leaving him alone. He pulled hard on the cigarette. He had no clear plan. Wobbling, he managed to climb onto the table. He pulled on the cigarette like it was a strong opiate he was addicted to. Jumping off the table, he managed to punch his fist through a pane of glass that was partitioning the top of the room, and clutching at a piece of glass before he fell to the floor, he slashed a little at his wrist. There was pandemonium then, panic. Not long before, a man had died in these police barracks and they didn't want another. They seemed to be all around him, kicking him. The oldest one, who really seemed to get off on beating him, had his balls again. Then an English voice at the doorway told him to stop. "But sir, he still has some glass." "Now calm down, sonny," said the English voice. "I am calm. Just get these animals off me," Manus said, and at a nod from the Englishman, Manus was left alone with one uniformed pig. Manus was given a doctor, who refused to examine him, but bandaged his wrist, which was hardly scratched. Manus was given some blue and white capsules. Manus was then transferred to Town Hall Street cells. The desk sergeant that night was actually the father of Manus's friend Harry, who had been shot dead for being a Fenian lover. Harry's father sat in the cell with Manus. He got him an extra blanket and tea with sugar. Harry's father cried. Harry's killer had received a ridiculously short prison sentence and had got out early for good behaviour. Harry's flesh had hardly rotted off his bones, and his killer was walking the streets. If Manus was found guilty of robbing a chemist, he would probably serve longer than Harry's killer. And Harry's father cried in the cell with Manus and gave him cigarettes. Manus had still been spaced out from all the barbs they had had the night before, and then the blue and white capsules the doctor gave him seemed to top the whole buzz back up again. Manus still felt a little spaced out 3 days later as he shuffled down a corridor towards the exercise yard with no laces in his shoes. In the yard, screws with Alsatian dogs made sure the prisoners kept walking in circles and didn't shelter from the wind in the corners. Manus scrounged the smoke off the bloke beside him. The bloke was a big cloud hopper of a guy. Wore grey flannel trousers and spoke with a country accent. He stuck close to his two mates. "What you in for?" Manus asked and thought how he had once heard that you should never ask that question of anyone who had been to prison. "Murder," came the reply, and the clodhopper laughed. His two companions were in for the same crime. All three amused themselves by retelling how they had kicked someone to death. The victim's eyes had popped out, and they had squashed his brains on the pavement. They reminded Manus of Tolkien's trolls. "'Cause he was a Taig, a dirty Fenian bastard," they gave as their reason. Manus remembered that no matter how long he stayed away, or how often he tried to deny it, while in Northern Ireland he would be classified as a Taig, a dirty Fenian bastard, and as such he decided he had better stop talking to these three country bumpkins. One of them had on a pair of slippers. It wasn't hard to imagine him sat at the fireside, watching the telly, enjoying his tea. Manus wondered how they would survive in the prison. Manus wondered how he would survive in the prison. He walked more slowly. A kid who didn't look old enough to be in prison blagged the smoke off Manus's cigarette. "What you in for?" Manus asked again. Murder, came the child's reply, followed by a small giggle. Then, to give some credence in the face of Manus's look of disbelief, he added, I only done scout, really, but some fucking Brit died, so it's a murder rap. The kid came from some tiny border village. Manus imagined a hedge-lined road and the news coming over the radio. A soldier died today when his vehicle exploded over a landmine. After exercise, Manus was put in a different cell. It was only across the corridor, but it didn't stink half as much. Inmates that polished the brass door handles slipped some cigarette papers and butt tobacco, wrapped in a picture of a buxom woman with no clothes on under the door. Even if Manus could have related to the glossy picture, his genitals were still too sore, but he thanked him for the tobacco, which, when lit by means of putting a burning piece of paper underneath the door, gave him a tremendous rush and a light head. His cell now looked onto an exercise yard, and two inmates sweeping up in the yard talked to him through the bars of his window. They consoled him that D wing was the worst wing in the prison, the reception wing, which he normally passed through in a day. But since Manus had come in on the weekend, he had spent 3 long days there. On Monday, he was transferred. Just walking into the new wing cheered him up. Hardly homely, but it was clean and a lot brighter, more like a modern prison than a dungeon. All painted yellow. He was given clean sheets and a clean cell. Well, said the new warden. Well, in this wing, there's no reason why we shouldn't get along. Manus smiled then, safe at last from senseless brutality. He relaxed just that little bit, relaxed to make enough to make him feel that bit more vulnerable when the warden, misinterpreting his smile for some form of insolence, turned on him and screamed, What the fuck are you grinning at? Manus almost wept. Right then, continued the screw, after Manus had explained that he meant no harm by smiling. Protestants go out and get their lunch first. 23 and a quarter hour lock-up they're on at the moment. Catholics eat in the dining hall. What'll they do? Manus asked like a child lost. I'm nothing. There's a dining hall provided. It's up to you. The lock-up's voluntary. Manus sat in the dining hall and watched as his cellmate talked first to his own and then went back to their cell with his food. Manus sat right up front, near the telly. That was where the provies sat. There was more of them, and they ruled the prison. Provies were friendly enough towards him, pleased to see a new face, but when he explained that he wasn't one of them, they explained that he wasn't supposed to sit with them. Nothing personal, a pair of twins explained. It's just that you're an OC, ordinary criminal, and we're looking for political status. The twins were physically identical and dressed in identical clothes. Jeans that barely covered their knees and stripy socks, a fashion that had experienced a brief popularity some years before. Manus was given permission to go into the exercise yard, but told to sit at the back of the hall with the stickies, the official IRA. After lunch, his cellmate wouldn't speak to him and looked petrified when the door was opened and they were given the option of going out for exercise. Manus went. It looked to him like a lion's pit. The huge roofless concrete box was definitely Provy territory. The wardens didn't go into it. No Protestants or even stickies, just Provies and whatever OCs were given permission. Manus stood against the wall and was befriended by someone of his own age. Liked the same music and talked freely. Manus spoke openly of his drug taking, and later in the day, a tall Provy with long hair, who grinned a lot, told Manus not to mention drugs while inside. Late tea was the only time the prods stayed out of their cells. The Provies were locked up then as a punishment for their defiant drills and parades in the yard. So for 3/4 of an hour, the prods got to rule the dining hall. The Stickies and Manus and the 2 other OCs still went into the hall and sat quietly at the back, as usual. Their chance to rule never came. They never got to watch the telly. Manus tried hard to write letters that would get through the censors to a girl he had met and fallen in love with. The warden came back and laughed at him. All alone, is he? Screw the screw, thought Manus. As long as my letters get through. They never did. Manus had the distinction of being the only prisoner in the Crum with nil on the card outside the door where his religion should have been. Throughout the night, he listened to the screams of the caged people. Mostly they screamed at each other. One described how he had shot a girl, the wife of a fellow prisoner. He had shot her in the head. He had used dum-dum bullets. Her face was like tomato sauce. Someone with a broad Derry accent yelled at the soldiers. Hey, soldier! Derry voice had to be pulling himself up by the bars to shout out. Hey, soldier! Do you know what I'm in here for? What? The soldier shouted back. For shooting one of you bastards! Each Friday, Manus was transported back down to Town Hall Street and led through the underground tunnel to the court in Chichester Street. Each week, the police would shoot him down from bail because he had tried to commit suicide for no apparent reason, and they feared he would do the same again if released from custody. Manus told his solicitor what had really happened, and the solicitor told him to shut up, or he would go to prison for a long time for making unprovable accusations against the police. The solicitor wanted Manus to plead guilty, even though the police had no evidence against him. Manus had a record for robbing chemists, and pleading guilty was his best chance for a lighter sentence. But since his hearing was put back each week, he never actually got to make his plea public and would be remanded without bail for another week. Back at the Crum, his cellmate wanted a transfer to a cell with someone of his own denomination. Manus would have asked for a transfer on similar grounds, but there didn't seem to be anybody else in for drugs. So Manus was transferred to a cell with a young pro. He didn't look so young. He'd been on remand for over a year. He'd done scout as the first policewoman in the province was shot dead. Obviously, his interrogation made Manus's little slapping for a few hours look like a picnic in the country. One night, Manus had the young probie scrounge a fag for him. Such a bloody luxury, lying down on the bed smoking a fag, and to enjoy it to the full, Manus got up to empty his bladder into the potty in the corner. A screw came to the spy hole just then, and not being able to see Manus banged furiously on the door. Manus jumped and jerked his head back to let the screw see him, and the fag fell from Manus's lips into the piss pot. Psst. The day before his final hearing, two pigs came up to see Manus. Both of them had been present during his beating. They were all grins. Well, sonny, have you thought any more about this? Manus didn't quite understand the question, but an inspired guess made him say, I'm still innocent. And the pig came back with, well, if we drop a charge, will you plead guilty to possession of stolen property? The bottle of pills you had on you. Manus pleaded guilty to possession of stolen property, and on the 23rd of December 1976, got off with probation and a fine. Happy Xmas.